It didn't matter whose side they were on, their goal was to save lives in the midst of battle. This is how the Red Cross came to be. Starting as a field hospital at the Battle of Solferino in 1859, thanks to Henry Dunant. Shocked by the suffering of wounded soldiers left behind on the battlefield, he wanted to establish an organization to care for all victims of war without discrimination. With millions of volunteers worldwide, they work tirelessly each day to alleviate human suffering. Though they often go unseen, these dedicated heroes form the backbone of emergency aid around the globe. This is the story of the Red Cross Revolution. Chapter 1. Henry Dunant. Henry Dunant was born in 1828 in Geneva to a prosperous family known for their business savvy and dedication to serving others. Raised with deep Calvinist beliefs, caring for those in need was in his very soul from a young age. After studying hard, the eager 21-year-old Henry took a job at a banking company, willing to prove himself. Well, soon enough, his bosses came to Henry with an opportunity. They wanted him to travel all the way to Algeria on their behalf. Now Algeria was a long way from home, but our young Henry wasn't one to shy from adventure. He saw this as a chance to really make his mark. Henry planned to use the land over there to start a whole colony for other Swiss compatriots. And he succeeded in a short span. He managed to build a thriving business in Algerian territory, with his situation growing considerably. This success earned him a new role overseeing a large tract of arid land. But securing water rights there proved a challenge. Undeterred, Henry decided on a bold plan. He would travel directly to Emperor Napoleon III himself to plead his case. Napoleon was leading French and Italian armies facing off against the Austrians in northern Italy. Henry knew this was his only hope. Setting off across the battlefields for Lombardy, he made his way to Napoleon's field headquarters near the city of Solferino, his mission setting in motion events that would change the world. As Henry made his way across the battle-scarred fields towards Solferino, nothing could have prepared him for the sights that lay ahead. On the afternoon of June 24, 1859, over 23,000 men were strewn about, some writhing in agony, others deathly still amidst the carnage. More than 100,000 French, Italian, and Austrian soldiers had clashed in one of the bloodiest battles of the century near the small town. It was a brutal, merciless battle as man fought ruthlessly against man over the course of that single terrible day. By evening, around 6,000 souls had already been lost to the chaos and screams of warfare, with countless others left untended where they fell among the corpses. Henry had arrived to a scene from his darkest nightmares. Appalled by the immense sea of human suffering around him, he knew he could walk by no longer. Interrupting his travels, he sprang into urgent action, rallying shocked local villagers to quickly establish a makeshift field hospital amid the fields soaked red with blood. There, with no regard for flags or factions, they worked tirelessly through the night to tend to all victims of the conflict. "We are all brothers," became Henry's cry as he fought to save whomever he could from the jaws of death. After surviving that hellish day in Solferino, Henry was forever changed. Returning to Switzerland, he poured his heart onto the page, recounting with raw emotion all that he bore witness to in Italy. But this, more than a memoir, it was a plea to the powerful nations of the world. Henry had a vision: to rapidly establish relief societies wherever blood was shed, so that compassion could outrun cruelty on the battlefield. But he knew prominent figures must lead it to gain attention. In this way, volunteers from all walks could be found to care solely for suffering soldiers, caring not whom they fought for before. The next step was support from a larger body. And so on February 9, 1863, the first meeting took place under the Geneva Society for Public Welfare, the humble beginnings of what would soon be known as the mighty International Red Cross. Chapter 2. Founding of the International Red Cross. It was on a brisk February day in 1863 that the International Committee of the Red Cross was founded upon Henry Dunant's enduring vision. Supported fiercely by four fellow Swiss, Moynier, Dufour, Appia, and Monod. Their shared goal? To coordinate relief where blood was shed across the world. Their work gained swift wings. On October 26, the first international conference was held with delegates from 14 nations gathering in hope. Major resolutions were born there, including establishing societies to carry compassion to wounded warriors wherever rifles roared. Significantly, the conference designated a simple yet iconic emblem: a red cross on a white field. For neutral recognition and protection, were needed as medical workers braved battlefields where life hung by threads. They chose the inverse of Switzerland's proud colors, so mercy could be seen from afar. But Dunet's idea did not end there. In his book, he proposed ways to protect neutral humanitarian workers, risking life itself to aid all victims. So, the following year, representatives from 16 lands journeyed together in Swiss valleys. There, in a small diplomatic gathering, the landmark First Geneva Convention was signed, birthing international humanitarian law and laying foundations to shield all impacted by war's fury for generations yet unknown. Henry Dunet's vision spread wings on winds of goodwill across the globe. So, what started as a humble vision has grown into the world's largest outreach of hope, with a presence in nearly every nation under the sun. At its core, the Red Cross aims always to relieve suffering without prejudice, whether caused by conflict's cruelty, nature's fury, or crushing poverty's grip. Since those first righteous steps, the Red Cross has raced to countless battlefields where lives hung by threads. Over time, its services spread their wings farther still, flying also to disasters, natural and man-made, outbreaks that threaten to swallow communities whole. Through every storm, the Red Cross has upheld and refined its sacred fundamental principles: humanity, impartiality, neutrality, independence, voluntary service, unity, and universality, guiding lights to show mercy's way when darkness falls. However, despite that, they had to endure challenging situations until they succeeded in becoming the formidable force that the Red Cross represents today. Chapter 3. The World War I Impact. As the tale continues, the time was 1914, when the first great global war erupted across the lands. By then, the International Red Cross had stood for over half a century. Yet despite its name denoting a body worldwide, the brave souls of the IRC remained a modest band of 10 members when war broke out in August of that year. But the unforeseen scale of destruction unleashed by the Great War would change its fate forever. Within 2 months, as hostilities engulfed Europe, the ranks swelled 12-fold overnight. By late 1914, some 1,200 selfless workers flew their banner, chiefly with the newly established International Prisoners of War Agency. Their sacred duty, reuniting families torn asunder by the maelstrom of steel and fire. 14 national services formed to bridge divided lands. Beyond prisoners of war, the Geneva Agency also cared for others broken on war's furious wheels. Civilian internees and citizens trapped within occupied towns. Until this all-consuming global clash, civilians had never been embraced under the Red Cross mantle. But the total warfare swallowing Europe demanded outreach to every soul of humanity in need. This led the organization to some of its most impactful work that continues to shape our world to this day. In 1917, a groundbreaking appeal called for the unconditional release and return home of as many captives as possible, even in the midst of constant fighting. Most significantly, it called for the release of all able-bodied people, not just the sick or wounded. These repatriation missions launched the ICRC upon a pivotal new phase. By spreading its messengers of mercy widely across war-torn lands, delegations endured for extended periods in Central and Eastern Europe, the Middle East and Far East. No longer merely a local body, it emerged truly international, both through principles holding all humankind's sacred worth equally, and concrete responsibilities assumed beyond Geneva's walls. The harrowing suffering witnessed also expanded their mandate where need prevailed. This was the ICRC's second initiative, extending vital aid not only to captives journeying home, but civilian populations suffering crushing poverty, starvation and disease, especially in defeated realms like Austria and Hungary. Also, given hellish sanitation and the looming threat of contagions ravaging the vulnerable, especially typhus, the ICRC proposed a central office for epidemic control established that summer of 1919 in Vienna. Special care was devoted also to children, leading the ICRC to establish through unity with Save the Children Fund, the International Union for Child Welfare, in the early 1920s. So, in rising fully to the call of humanity's darkest hours, the Red Cross had at last grown into the mighty universal force protecting all people caught in war at crisis clause. Chapter 4. After the World War I. After the Great War, the expanded relief operations and massive repatriations created enormous financial and staffing demands on the ICRC. With their small team dwindling to under 100 after the war, doing it alone wasn't feasible in the New World, born from the ashes of war. The Red Cross had no choice but to forge key alliances, if hope was to spread further still. While early contacts since 1863 included Swiss and foreign bodies, most cooperation was within its family network. With the rise to post-war needs, far broader partnerships were vital, including teaming with international organizations like the ILO and League of Nations. And so cooperation blossomed beyond letters into true unified efforts shoulder to shoulder, assisting communities broken but unwilling to surrender. By the mid-1920s, transnational, interinstitutional teamwork took shape on widespread scales to rebuild shattered lands. Around a quarter of ICRC delegates willingly aided other groups too, where strings of fate crossed their paths. Associating in this way with sister organizations helped the ICRC navigate rising waves within humanity's growing outreach. With new actors like the League of Red Cross Societies and American Relief Administration seeking their place in global charity, partnerships ensured Mercy's banner flew united still. In the post-war period, the ICRC found itself adapting to humanitarian crises far beyond traditional international warfare. Founded to assist solely among warring European powers, the organization now aided those impacted by internal conflicts and unrest as well. As civil wars erupted in places like Russia, Silesia, and Ukraine, the Red Cross mobilized relief, just as it had for the Great War. So, as long as there were those in need, the ICRC intended to represent a source of help wherever found. While the scope of operations expanded tremendously over the decades, from empire's aftermath to contemporary struggles, the basic mission of relieving hardship remained the same. In the end, Henry Dunant's initial vision had grown to benefit communities worldwide. What began with that good man being upset by what he witnessed at the Battle of Solferino, it blossomed into this immense worldwide force protecting everyone equally. Chapter 5. The Memory of a Man. So, yes, Dunant was a kind and selfless man who dedicated his life to helping others. He was so committed that he neglected his businesses and ended up going bankrupt. After that, he experienced years of extreme poverty, traveling by foot to Alsace, Germany, and Italy, relying on the generosity and hospitality of his friends. Finally, in 1887, he arrived in the Swiss town of Heiden, where he fell ill. He found shelter in the local hospice, and in 1895, he was discovered by a journalist named George Bomberger. Bomberger wrote an article about him, and within a few days, it was published in newspapers all across Europe. Then from all ends of the wide world, messages of sympathy flooded in. His greatest reward came in 1901 when he became the first recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize for his role in founding the International Red Cross movement and initiating the Geneva Convention. There is no man who more deserves this honor, for it was you 40 years ago who set on foot the international organization for the relief of the wounded on the battlefield. Without you, the Red Cross, the supreme humanitarian achievement of the 19th century, would probably have never been undertaken. These were the official words of congratulation extended to Jean-Henri Dunant in 1901 when the International Committee awarded him the first Nobel Peace Prize for his outstanding work. Despite his awards and international recognition, Dunant remained in room 12 of that old hospice. He didn't spend a single penny of the prize money. Instead, he left the money to various charitable organizations in Norway and Switzerland, and donated a bed to the hospice, and not for himself, but for the poorest residents of Heiden in times of need. In his final years, he battled depression and paranoia until his death on October 30, 1910. In a grave plain as requested, without mourners or markers, the good man's ashes returned unto dust. Yet, in eternal memory, does his legacy lift lowly lives to light. If you like this video, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel to stay tuned with us. For now, we're saying goodbye, but we'll catch up with you in another intriguing story of people who made a difference. Until then.